political analyst and professor at Curtin University, Joe Siracusa, to try and make sense of what's going on in Afghanistan at the moment as the clock ticks down to the last flight out of Kabul, which will be tomorrow, Joe. How do you think this is going to play out, and then what happens beyond that?
Okay, Pete. Good morning, Pete. Look, we've reached the end of this war, and all of America's wars, there's sort of a reckoning or an accountability. Americans have a saying that they win wars and lose the peace. And that happened during the Cold War, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and all the rest of it. So now we're getting down to the accountability, and the question is, who lost the war? Because America didn't lose any major battles, and they go to war in Afghanistan. 20 years later, they hand it back to the enemy, not the original Al-Qaeda people, but they hand it over to the Taliban. So there's going to be a sort of a serious reckoning. There's going to be a lot of accountability. What's different this time is there's no general to take the fall. Westmoreland took the fall for Vietnam. General MacArthur took the fall for the failure to win conclusively in Korea. In those days, the generals just shut up and went in the corner. Today, and I've been monitoring American television, all the talk shows have generals on it, General McMaster, General Petraeus, and they're all saying if people had listened to them, they would have won the war. This introduction of the generals into the debate is, I think, is a very serious thing. That's quite different, as a matter of fact. Now, look, to be fair to Biden, you know, he had a couple choices here, and both of them were terrible. He could have stayed in the war, and he could have angered the 60% of the American people who wanted to get out of it, or he could get out of the war as gracefully as he could. It wasn't graceful. It was quite messy. And now he's angered 60% of the American people for not doing it properly. At the end of all this, Pete, is that I think Biden has lost his credibility, and I think the Biden presidency is finished.
Yeah,
he can't survive this.
He's almost a lame duck, and he's only been president for, what, 6 months, Joe?
Well, yeah, and he promised much. But look, this accountability is very important. It looks like the blame game to some people, but without remembering and without understanding what went on, we can't move forward, because it informs all the discourse and the rest of it. So I think we're in for an important time, but we got differences here. Now, just two things before we end. Number one is Leon Panetta, the former Secretary of Defense, says we're going to be back in Afghanistan within a year to battle Al-Qaeda and ISIS, and that there's no way to get around it.
In what shape?
Well, we're going to be sending probably an armada of Reaper drones and the rest of it. He actually is talking about boots on the ground. He says, look, we're gonna have to go back because these people represent a threat to the American homeland. And the other thing is that the civil war has begun there between the Taliban and ISIS. And one of the things that we haven't covered in the news in this last week is that when the ISIS let 5,000 people out of their prison near Bagram Air Force Base, they took 8 of these people. One of them was a former commander of ISIS, and 7 of his associates, and they executed him in front of the prison. So, you know,
can I ask you, just on that? I mean, that was a critical mistake that was made, right? Just giving up Bagram. But I'm trying to work out why the Taliban, and they're enemies with ISIS. Why would they have let the ISIS prisoners go?
Well, because they didn't let them go. They killed these particular people. There would have been some subordinates there, foot soldiers, but they got the leadership. They cut off the leadership of ISIS there. And so they're at loggerheads. And of course, ISIS wants one thing. It wants to show the world that it pushed America out. The next 48 hours, of course, that's what we got, are very dangerous, because they want to end it with blowing up or bringing down a C-17 plane with 600 people in it. So that's the end of the game. But look, these people regard themselves as kind of heretics. The ISIS people regard the Taliban as sitting with the Pakistanis and playing with the Americans.
And not being strong enough.
And the rest of us, of course, are just are infidels, and anybody who helped us in Afghanistan, they are slaves to the infidels. So these guys, you know, they reduce the world to black and white.
Yeah.
But Panetta, who's a very sensible guy, says we can't avoid going back because this is new business, and of course, the war on terror just got a new lease on life.
All right, Joe, I'm going to bring you back in this week as we count down that last flight out of Kabul tomorrow. That's the deadline, at least, anyway. It's looking like it's not going to be extended, but there could be a real flurry of dangerous activity happening up until that point and well beyond that. Joe, appreciate that. Good to see you. We'll talk to you soon.